Alright guys, I want to welcome you all back to some more Witch on the Holy Night. I don't know about you all, but I'm looking forward to seeing how Soujuuro manages to talk his way into convincing Alice to let him stay. Or at least to keep him in her good books. So if anything else, hope you all continue to enjoy. Thank you again for all the love and support. And let's continue on. Alright everyone, and we are back.
何に対してのものかはあんまり言いたくないけど。
Poor Soujuuro did not even realize that he himself was the reason. She looked at him, and for an instant he witnessed an emotion on her face of which he had never seen the likes of before.
じゃあね。これが最後になるかもしれないから、お別れぐらいは言っておくわ。あなたはアリスを甘く見すぎてる。でも、それが同時にあんたの強みなのよね。私たちには毒にしかならないけれど。
The door slammed loudly shut behind her. Her steps were audible as she walked away on the other side of the wall. The corridor must have been nearly freezing without any central heating, but Aoko seemed perfectly comfortable.
なんで私から出ていくんだ。順番が逆。普通先に出てくのはそっちじゃない。
Aoko promptly kicked Soujuuro out of her room. Once again, the wooden door closed with a slam. The corridor was not as cold as he had expected. Not quite as bad as a freezer, at least. The second day of exams ended and Soujuuro was on his way back to the mansion. The road grew steeper and the woods thicker as he made his way up the familiar slope. People in town called it not a hill, but a mountain, simply because it took over 20 minutes to climb. This did not sit well with Soujuuro, for whom a mountain was something that could not be overcome so easily. The road was paved, for one thing, and the canopy overhead let in plenty of sunlight to guide the way. None of the inclines were especially steep, and no animals lurked in the underbush. There was no chance of losing his way, no reason to worry about getting lost.
情けない。まだ未練ばっかりだ。
Soujuuro quietly reprimanded himself for getting so wrapped up in his own little world. In the past few weeks since moving here, he had been constantly comparing the town with his former mountain home. Normally, he would not get upset over it. But in recent days, since meeting Aoko as it happened, he had become rather hung up on the differences. He was none the wiser as to why, but he knew that Aoko was a force that could not be stopped. This naturally made him want to quicken his own pace. The mansion where they both lived was the antipathy of her lively personality. It stood out like a sore thumb, even in a town like Misaki. Some people said it was haunted. There were no ghosts per se, but it was inhabited by magicians, so their claims were closer to the truth than they could have possibly known.
そういえば、幽霊と魔法使いっていうのは、どっちが常識外れなんだろ
う。Lost in contemplation as he was, the boy failed to notice how his own lack of familiarity with the city life played into the equation. In any case, none of his pondering changed what needed to be done. Tomorrow was the last day of exams. That meant he had only a little longer until Aoko stopped taking responsibility for his safety. If possible, today was going to be the day when the mansion's owner accepted his continued residence there. Soujuuro slipped between the trees encircling the mansion and walked down the naturally tree-lined avenue that led him to the front door.
よし。
Taking a deep breath, he stepped across the threshold. The drawing room was where he expected to find Alice. However, he found himself face to face with a most unexpected scene. A few steps in, he arrived at the large foyer extending from the mansion's entrance. but one thing was clearly out of place. The foyer of the mansion was like a hall in a medieval castle. It was illuminated by the cold winter sun casting down through the skylight, unaided by artificial light. The wooden tiles smelled of the outdoors. And there was Alice, dressed in all black, huddled against a column so enormous it resembled a sharply cornered tree trunk. The mansion was quite literally supporting her frail body. Like a mother's lullaby or a gently rocking cradle. The heavy atmosphere within this old building suppressed even the slightest stir, almost as if warding away any disturbance to her slumber. There, she slept in the shadows of home. Hidden away from outsiders, her sleeping figure was enough to mesmerize anyone who laid eyes upon her. Soujuuro instinctively looked up at the ceiling out of sheer awkwardness. He wanted to surprise her, but not in this way. Her slender frame lay asleep by the fireplace. This scene was as beautiful as a painting, yet hard on his heart at the same time. Her slumber seemed breathless. She was too still, with not even a hint of movement. And yet, slumped against the frigid column under the cold winter sky, happiness appeared to be her blanket. A passerby would not be blamed for thinking she was in the most peaceful state of eternal slumber, death. Soujuuro spoke to himself as he gazed idly upon her. Bringing her a blanket or something warm did not so much as cross the boy's mind. Instead, odd as it sounds, the first thing he thought to do was to go prepare some tea. He made sure to be as quiet as possible as he opened the drawing room door. On the table, waiting for him, were 3 pills. They were the medicine Aoko required him to take every day when he arrived home. Gulping down the vaguely sweet pills and continuing on to the kitchen, he selected a box of tea from among the many in the cabinet and brewed enough for 2 people. Alice was still asleep when he returned to the foyer. Careful not to make any noise, he crouched close to the ground. He was startled by how cold the floor felt through his pants. He thought it would be warmer here by the fireplace, but then again, he recalled how Aoko had referred to it as a useless hole in the wall. What was likely the case was that neither she nor Alice knew how to use it properly. After taking the teacups from the tray and placing one in front of each of them, Soujuuro carefully pulled his textbook on a classical literature from his satchel. He could still see her angry face from this morning. The reason for her anger was still as much a mystery as the unusual look he saw briefly come across her face. In any case, one thing was certain. He needed to start studying for tomorrow. Thanks to Aoko's instruction, today's exam went well enough, but tomorrow's would be an even more formidable challenge. After how angry she was this morning, he could not expect her to help him again tonight.
そのくせ点数悪いと怒るし、別に青崎が怒る筋合いじゃないと思う。
He complained under his breath as he cracked open his textbook. Apparently, he intended to spend his time in this fashion until Alice finally awoke. The sound of the pages turning was the only audible noise in the grand hall. There was no ticking of clocks or rustling of leaves to disturb her sleep. After a few hours, Soujuuro quietly rose to his feet. The light that filled the foyer was beginning to turn from white to red.
そろそろバイトの時間か。
He glanced again at Alice as he stretched his stiff back. She slept in perfect stillness, just as she had this entire time. Soujuuro arched his brow in speculation. He had no idea what her normal sleeping schedule was like, so he had no idea as to whether he should wake her.
いや、青崎も帰ってくるだろうし、いらぬ世話かな。
As if reaching the end of a long train of thought, Soujuuro gave a quick nod of his head and took his leave of the mansion. Today, work was a shift at the Chinese restaurant in Misaki's shopping district, the Mad Bear. Their uniforms had been made by someone with an obvious preference for garish colors. The orange apron was emblazoned with a cartoonish polar bear slashing a walk in two with its powerful claws. The design resembled warning signs about wild animals seen in the mountains and stood out in Misaki for its one-of-a-kind originality. This was the Chinese restaurant, the Mad Bear. Aside from its name and logo, the restaurant was the type of cheap hole-in-the-wall dive that could be found anywhere. It faced competition from the ever-increasing number of chain restaurants, though it had managed to last longer than the other dining spots, having received rave reviews on a regular basis. The Mad Bear prioritized the personal touch, focusing on its local clientele, and thus made a point to offer home delivery. It had earned the affectionate moniker QKS, the Quick Killer Stop. Making these deliveries was Soujuro's responsibility for the time being. Places in Misaki within cycling distance fell under his domain. Anything beyond that was handled by a more experienced staff member on the legendary 50cc King Salmon motorbike. But anyway.
ヤシロギのダチから聞いたんだけどな。
When delivery workers were not out on deliveries, they spent their shift bussing tables or washing dishes. The dinner rush was yet to come, and Soujuuro and his fellow delivery boys were shooting the breeze while washing dishes in the back.
聞いてるか、しずき。
聞いてるよ、木の実。
The two were elbow deep in a giant sink as they enthusiastically scrubbed. At least that was what they pretended to do while they gossiped.
和食のケニアだけじゃねえんだってよ。三崎町の大帝都にもメシアンにもその手の注文があったらしいぜ。そんなに肉が欲しいなら下市に行けばいいのにな。なんだって生肉だの大物の鮭丸ごとだのを出前させやがるのか。どうよ、こう露骨にヤバそうな話じゃねえ。ワニとかアザラシでも飼ってるんじゃねえかな、そいつ。
他に比べてみると確かに珍しい話だと思う。ところで木の実、ワニってなんだ？
ワニはワニだろう。だっせ、実物見たことないのかよ。まあ俺もねえけどな。今度ガクガク動物ランドのアフリカ特集ビデオを貸してやるから見とけよ。
This was a familiar pattern of conversation between the two, especially now Kinomi was used to Soujuro's lack of general knowledge. Their banter was interrupted by the delivery phone. The manager snapped up the receiver and quickly jotted down the order and the address. Once he hung up, everyone in the kitchen did their best to avoid making eye contact with him. Nobody wanted to go rushing out for a delivery on such a cold day.
しずきくん、ちょっと遠いけど配達をお願い。
The manager singled Soujuuro out for the task, seemingly unfazed by his staff's laziness.
はい、これ届けるもののリスト。異例だからあまり他のバイトには他言しないようにね。
The manager tore the sheet with the order and address written on it from his memo pad. I was gonna say bento pad. Soujuuro took one look at it before a grimace quietly spread across his face. It's the mansion, isn't it?
マネージャー？
なんだい？
The manager stared right back at him as if he could tell what it was he wanted to say.
君の疑問はもっともだ。しかしまあ、長いことこの商売をやっていると、時にはこんなバカな話が転がってくることもある。そうおかしなことじゃない。じゃ、冷蔵庫から品物持ってくるから。
Soujuuro stared in admiration as the manager dressed in black marched out of the kitchen in his all-business way. Nowhere was free from the odd occurrence now and then. It was after 10 at night. Soujuuro had taken a small detour on his way home from work and now faced an outraged Aoko as expected. Seeing her so visibly irritated made him feel a rush of relief. He did not know why she was angry, but he could tell it was a different type of anger than what he saw earlier that morning.
遅いってまだ10時になったばかりだろう。どうしたんだ、青崎。
He set down the cardboard box he had been carrying in his arms and glanced toward the fireplace. The sleeping girl was there no more.
違うわ。もう10時になったの間違いでしょ。あんたってほんと自分がどんな状態にあるか分かってないのね。
ん？
いいから今に来て
She walked briskly to the other room without pausing, leaving Sojiro standing in confusion, head tilted to one side. He proceeded to pick his box back up and follow after her eagerly. He removed his coat and hung it on the hanger as he entered the living room. Apparently, today was one of those days where Alice kept herself locked away in her room. On the table were the familiar pills.
説明しなかった私も悪いけど、あなたも帰ってくる時間は守ってよね。こっちはそのつもりで作ってるんだから。
Aoko handed him the pills and a glass of water with an expectant look on her face.
薬なら出かける前に飲んだけど、体の調子だって悪くないし、そんなに慌てることか？
は？なんだって私たちがあんたの健康を気にかけなくちゃいけないのよ。勘違いしてるようだけど、あんたが帰ってくるたびに飲んでるのって平たく言えば毒よ。即効性じゃないから効き目は半日すると出てくるんだけど、その前に新しい毒薬を飲んでおかないと古い毒が体に回ってばったりいくって寸法ね。アリスのやつ、これぐらいしないと信用できないって言い張ったのよ。ほら、分かったらさっさと飲む。ま、私もこれ面倒だと思うし。近いうちもっと形のある方法を考えてみるから、それまでこの方法で我慢して。
言ってることは支離滅裂だが、とにかく今まで良くないものを飲んでたんだな。
All this time, Alice had been giving him poison. Sojiro took the pills from her and gulped it down. The fact that it was poison gave him no pause at all. And as for his roommate's tyrannical behavior, he showed no signs of standing up to it.
まったく、毒を持って毒を制するなんて、また古風な真似するな、青崎もアリスも。
Well, as long as you're carefree about it, right? Sojiro's face relaxed into a smile upon finding the funny side of the situation. Aoko was utterly dumbfounded as to how he could be happy at a time like this.
今日帰りが遅れたのは、アパートまで荷物を取りに行っていたからなんだ。そういうことなら電話の一つでもすればよかった。
荷物ってまさかそれじゃないでしょうね。
Sojiro nodded emphatically as she pointed incredulously at the cardboard box in his hands.
住んでいないのに家賃を払うのはバカらしいから、今日で引き上げてきた。一応いつでも戻れるように話はつけてあるから、3ヶ月ぐらいは大丈夫だよ。
家賃？あ、そっか、そうよね。私ってばなんでそんなことを忘れてたんだろう。アリスが聞いたら喜ぶわ、そりゃ。
A smile blossomed across her face as they say. It was the open, bold-faced look of a child who just came up with a mischievous plan. Sojiro shook with fear at the thought of what that smile might bring his way. And rightfully
け
so,
ど
sir.
ずいぶん少ないのね、荷物。段ボール1箱分しかないの？
そうかな。十分多いだろう。
ちょっと前に戻ったわ。珍しく食後もここに残ってたんだけど、待ちきれなかったみたいね。
She gave Sojiro a meaningful look while continuing to smile that sinister smile.
待ちきれなかったって何を？
そりゃあ、アリスが眠ってるのをいいことに、在庫のないフォションとブルーキャリコを勝手に使ってくれたどこかの誰かさんにお仕置きするためなんじゃない？
フォッションってあのお茶の葉？
そう、私もびっくりしたけどね。アリスがどっかで寝入るのはよくあることだけど、紅茶を用意して眠るなんてのは初めてだったから。どんな心境の変化か知りたくて起こしたら、アリスの方が驚いてたわ。一体誰の仕業なんだって。
Sojiro clapped his hands together as if remembering something important. He had forgotten to clean up the tea before leaving. The regret written from forehead to chin delighted Aoko immensely.
そうか。それじゃあアリスは怒っていただろう。
当然、コマドリがとばっちりでドリブルされてたしね。
ああ、俺でも怒る。片付けをきちんとしないなんて、だらしないにも程がある。
Sojiro harshly scolded himself for his failure.
論点違う。 あのね、寝顔を間近で見られたから怒ってるのよ、アリスは。
え、そうかな。アリスはそういうのは気にしないと思うんだけど。
あんたはそうかもしれないけど、私たちは気にするの。
Aoko's glare was enough to make glass shatter. There was an indescribable intensity in the way she said that.
それは青崎たち限定の話か？
世間一般での常識よ。自分が気にしないからって他人もそうだと思ってると、いつか火傷するからね。
でもそれだったらロビーで寝ているアリスにだって問題ないか？見かけたら放っておけないだろう、あんなの。
その心意気は立派だけど、そこはそれ。この館の持ち主は彼女だから。この洋館内であなたが出会ったあらゆる不義不始末、失敗失態の責任は宗十郎に押し付けられるの。この意味、わかる？
Aoko's question sent Sojiro into a trance of deep thought until finally he uttered.
つまりここはアリスの自治領なんだな。
はい、よくできました。正確には私とアリスのだけどね。領主は何をやっても許されるってことよ。
She smiled as she spoke and plopped herself down on the sofa. Sojiro remained standing behind the sofa opposite her as he ran over their conversation again and again in his head. The notion of this being their kingdom made him realize he actually had no idea where the girls had come from or their family's background.
青崎、君ご両親はどうしてるんだ？
He inadvertently blurted out, this being the question foremost on his mind.
生きてるわよ。三崎町から下りに4駅行った東川ってところの地主。死は祖父だけど、今は隠居して両親と一緒の土地に住んでるわ。
そう聞くとなんだか普通の家庭だな。
Sojiro had imagined something more outrageous for a family of magicians.
両親はね、父さんにはあんまり魔術回路は作られなかったみたいだから、その分私には2世代分の潜在能力があるって祖父は言ってるけど、どうだか。宗十郎の期待してるような一族はどっちかっていうとアリスの方よ。私と違って英国出身だからね、彼女。
Aoko offered nothing more, as if to suggest that was as far as she was willing to reveal for now. Sojiro had insisted on talking to Alice directly rather than hearing things secondhand, so chose not to go back on his word by pushing the topic further.
ま、詳しくは本人から聞きなさい。アリスの紅茶好きもそこから来てるんだし。そういえば、なんで今日に限ってリーフティーなんか入れたの？ティーバッグを使った方がまだマシだったでしょうに。
青崎がそっちの方がいいって言ったじゃないか。アリスは紅茶にうるさいって。
Aoko was momentarily at a loss for words. He seemed so oblivious most of the time, but apparently he was attentive to some details, at least selectively.
ま、いいわ。それより明日の放課後だけど、また一人で帰ってくれない？年明けの行事があるんだけど、その場しのぎで行った餅つき大会が通っちゃってさ、明日も忙しいのよ、私。
Sojiro nodded in acceptance. In fact, he had already been planning to do so before she even asked.
それはいいけど、体は大丈夫か、青崎。昨日から寝てないだろう。
夕方に3時間ちょい仮眠を取ったから調子はいいわ。そういうあんたこそ体は持つんでしょうね。もう少ししたら昨日の続き始めるわよ。
She meant the all-night cramming session, of course. Needless to say, Sojiro was more than likely to struggle given that he too had not slept a wink. All he could do was give a relieved smile. He thought back to the days just after he transferred here, when she watched his every move from the sidelines and showed a startling amount of concern for him.
いいよ。どのみち苦労するのは青崎の方だし、異例中の異例はありがたく受け取っておくとしよう。
His cheery response grated on her just a little.
ほんと、くだらないことだけはしつこく覚えてるんだから。
She heaved her shoulders in exasperation and dropped her head as an excuse to look away from the beaming smile on his face. following day. The last day of the finals had ended without a hitch. The final December hurdle was finally a thing of the past. For all but one student, that is. To Soujuuro, the greatest challenge was yet to come. He bid farewell to his classmates, all jittery with excitement for the last day of term, and headed into Shiroi-Nozuka Woods. The road home was no different than yesterday, like he was reliving yet another day striding up that hill. Yet today there was a fierce determination in his steps. Today was his last chance, and he wanted nothing more than to talk to the girl. He did not care if she was cruel to him or ignored him, nor whether Aoko was being truthful when she said that she could trap him in a mirror land, or something like that. All he really cared about was having the chance to speak with her face to face. But nothing is ever that simple. To tell the truth, what he found upon finally entering the mansion was not wholly unexpected.
よく寝る子だな、本当。
Again? Same spot? The deja vu he was experiencing made him dizzy. Faced with an exact reenactment of the previous day, he could not help but blurt out what he was thinking. Alice was sleeping by the fireplace just as she had done yesterday. The way her legs draped to one side resembled those of a princess in a children's book. She looked more comfortable than she had the day before. Miraculously, he had a rare flash of insight that enabled him to read the situation more clearly.
学校で飛び丸は一人何をしているんだろ
Upon glancing back at the entrance, he made his decision, took a deep breath, and rolled up his sleeves. If today was a reenactment of yesterday, then he supposed he would play along with that idea. Soujuuro removed his shoes and headed for the kitchen. He was off to prepare another ill-fated pot of tea. Since she was angry about him using her precious falcon, this time he turned to Jackson's fruit and herb brew. Sadly, this was about as much as Soujuuro could manage to amend his behavior. He had failed to realize that it was not the brand of tea that had landed him in hot water, but rather his incorrect brewing method. After filling the pot with tea, he carried it back to the foyer. His breath was visible in the cold air as he sat himself down by the fireplace. Soujuuro took a sip of the fruity tea he had prepared for himself and pulled his textbook from his bag. Exams were over now, but he had been instructed to take extra classes for the subjects from day one of school. Quite inevitable. The foyer was warmer than outside, but still far from comfortable. It was enough to make anyone yearn for some source of warmth. Soujuuro dove into his electronics textbook in the winter-chilled hall. The class was not very popular, which is why it had been recommended to him in the first place. That fact that everyone who took it started on equal footing made it more appealing to him than other classes.
けど青崎の言う通り
He downed the rest of the tea, having no appreciation for its flavor, and refilled his cup. The tea was still warm since the ceramic teapot had excellent heat retention.
文字で物事を覚えるのは苦手みたいだ
He vaguely recalled their conversation as his eyes advanced across the page. The lack of lighting in the foyer was forcing him to rely on illumination from the skylight. The light cut into the room at a diagonal angle, in such a way as to divide the foyer into the light and dark areas, with the fireplace in shadow. The room resembled an ancient ruins covered in ash, or perhaps the quiet forgotten world of a faded fairy tale. Time slipped on within the white walls of this room, hidden away from the sun. The minutes passed slowly for some time until the sound of a textbook slamming shut brought the room back to reality. Soujuuro stretched his stiff back and eagerly got started on cleaning up. He put his textbook back in his bag, placed his cup on the tray, leaving Alice sitting in front of her on the floor.
バイトの時間だ
He said unceremoniously. He spoke as if to convince himself that he had no other choice as he prepared to leave the sleepy foyer behind. But before he could, a sound behind him stopped him in his tracks. He turned around with his bag under his arm and tray in his hands. So as to not cause even a ripple in her teacup, he greeted her.
Yeah.
Alright guys, I'm going to end the video here for today. Thank you all for watching. When we come back, we're finally going to find out if everything would be okay between these two.